This is the picture that I will be working on. It's a nice photograph of the Statue of Liberty, converted to grayscale, and I will be using pencil and paper to reproduce it. The way that I start out is very straightforward. As you might have noticed, there was a grid that I put into Inkscape, and that's the same grid that I'll be drawing on my paper. Let me just make sure I have all my tools here. Yeah, so I'll use H to draw the grid so that it's a nice light color or a light shade that can be easily erased. And I'll just record the entire process from start to finish. All right, so hopefully the camera angle is okay. And I'll narrate on occasion about what I'm doing. So I'm just lining up the ruler with the paper. This part doesn't have to be ultra precise, but it doesn't hurt to be a little bit careful. So I notch each inch. And this paper is kind of new to me. It's a very, very smooth paper. So I don't have a good grasp of how it reacts to various things, but it almost feels like I'm painting with graphite when I use this paper. So even the lightest little touch leads to some pretty clear marks. So even though this is an H pencil, which is lighter than what I usually use, which is an HB, it's actually leaving much darker marks than I'm kind of expecting as I draw these notches. Okay. And then I do the same thing across. And you can probably tell that the lighting isn't so great right now. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning. I can't sleep, and I figure doing this is probably more healthy than drinking or smoking weed. Okay, and then so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, I'll just go out all the way to here. Notch. And these notches don't have to be extremely precise. There can be a little bit of play with these. So now that I have all these notches, I can then just very quickly finish, just finish the grid. I don't know if you can see it, but each square is a 1 inch by 1 inch square. And it's a good size that works well for this paper, which is like 9 by 11 or 9 by 12, something like that. And I've experimented with different grid sizes, both on Inkscape and on paper. And at some point I just decided to just standardize with something and settled on 1 inch by 1 inch squares. Okay, so I'm not measuring super precisely, but yeah, being reasonably careful. So now the grid is ready to be used to help me trace this thing out. And the reason I use a grid is that I'm taking a very conservative approach to learning how to draw. And instead of focusing on everything at once and trying to master proportions and shading and colors all at once, I'm letting the grid figure out the proportions for me, and then I can just focus purely on shading. And a lot of my work so far has been in pencil paper, because I want to get a good feel for physical media, and then slowly I'll transition to color and then more expressive forms of art. Because right now everything I'm doing is portraits. Okay, so I'll be using a 4B and a 6B for much of this, because the picture I've chosen is very high contrast, which is something that I like. These haven't been sharpened in some time, so let me just sharpen these. And you'll notice that I've put a thing under the pad so I get a better angle while looking at this. Probably not the best camera angle, but not much I can do there. And I'll start with this this H, but let me get a better. I need to get a better, slightly better angle there. Okay, that'll help keep my shadow of my head out of the way, and I'll give a reasonable angle lighting for the camera. Okay. So, yeah. So this is I just kind of start by tracing out the shapes in very broad, relatively broad strokes. I try to keep track of the proportions as I trace on the paper. Let's see, and I also take note of where the center of some of these boxes are. So I'll draw a little line there. If I really want to be precise, I'll do another trace to get that exact middle spot. But this is because the torch, I'm already having trouble eyeing the position of the thing. So this curve I can see intersects the middle part of this edge, and then it intersects almost vertically here. There we go. The top part of the torch is kind of fades out like that. Okay. So the torch has little crowns that'll mark, just as a quick sketch, little blurs. One here and then one here. So something like that. And close to the handle. Let's see, and this part of the torch I'm noticing gets very close to this diagonal line of this square, so I gotta account for that. There we go. So I'll refine this shape, and it's intentionally very rough, because it just helps to have some starting point when I come back to this and actually start drawing it. Maybe I'll just draw some quick lines here. It also helps me kind of calibrate my arm as I get to working on this. Yeah, so already I'm very unsatisfied with how this has started, but yeah, it's a process, and I'll come back to it, and it'll be okay. I'm unsatisfied right now just because the way that I've started drawing this torch, it's not proportioned all that well, but again, that's okay. Yeah. Here, this part comes in just a bit above the halfway point there. And then we have some of the digits. And the way that the picture is showing on Inkscape is much smaller than what I'm seeing in the grid here. So it makes it a lot harder to, so I have to adjust on the fly, which I understand is a trivial exercise for trained artists, but for me, I just, it's a struggle for me. And then about halfway is where the palm meets the handle of the torch. The handle of the torch extends all the way down almost to here, like this, and the handle so it's really hard to let go of my perfectionism, but I will come back to it. I take solace in the fact that I'll come back to it, and everything will be fine. Okay, so down here, now we start the sleeve. Let's see. That was a bit. And you can see also how I'm holding the pencil. It just happens to be the most natural way for me to hold it at this step in the drawing process, because it gives me it forces me to use my arm. And when you're learning to draw, I've noticed that this is actually a very useful habit to draw with your arm as opposed to just your elbow or just your wrist or your hand. Okay, so that's the sleeve, and then the top portion of the arm. That's the center. We come beneath it a little bit. There's a slight curve this way. Yeah, I gotta get it's hard for me to see the screen, some of the details in the screen. So something like, something like this. This certainly goes up and above. Okay, so that's the bottom of the thumb. The handle comes up all the way up that way, and then we have some fingers. And this is pointing more up this way. Okay, and the bottom of the torch will be shaded. Okay, and then the neck here. So let me outline the face. Here's the cheek. And here's the majestic crown. Let's see, and then this is the bottom of the hair with the curls. And the nose, let's see, so the center of this square is here, and that's just where one of the eyes, the brow, is located. And we have the brow there. bottom of the nose is around here. The mouth is just like that. And just above this brow is the bottom of the hair there, and we can already see the face taking shape nicely. Okay, and this part of the hair comes pretty far forward. There we go. And the chin is quite tight on that intersection. Extends out to here. And then the rest of the chin and then part of the neck is in shadow. Okay, there the chin. Yeah, the neck just barely crosses that center point. We have more fabric. There's like a knot of fabric here. And the tablet with the inscription. One of the greatest quotes of all time. I am an immigrant and love the quote. Can't remember it off the top of my head, but the thing about the huddled masses definitely strikes a chord with me. So the wrist is there. And we have, finger, and then pinky finger. So as awful as this might look at first glance, it's a lot like, what I'm doing is I'm writing a very, very, very rough draft. That's the analogy I have in mind here. So because I find it easier to edit documents than to write them. And just writing something always helps me refine it and edit it, and this is the same idea. It's a terrible rough draft. You know, I'm not so skilled that I can nail these things on the first try, but it's something that I can work with and fix as I go along. And that works pretty well. So now I'm just drawing the shadows on the cloth, some of them anyway, just as kind of landmarks to the rest of, so that I can add details in later. And this is about, what the most obvious things look like here. Most obvious lines, most obvious contours, most obvious shadows. Okay, I'll very roughly sketch the thorns on the crown. And these I know I'll have to be very careful about because they're very crisp, and I need to capture that as part of this portrait. Yeah, there's an incredible contrast now that I look at this between the crisp crown, the very I don't know, like sober face, very sober expression, um, and all the wrinkled clothes. These are I might have to use a ruler when I come back to the thorns. It's incredible. When I draw portraits, I just pick up on a lot more details that I just would not otherwise notice. And even with people or pets that I've known for a while, I'm always very surprised at what I can pick up on. Okay, so I'll keep that part as it is. And this here, the tablet, is something like this. And I'm just giving myself some sense of the values. Not a whole lot, trying not to make things too definite yet, because there's a good chance I will need to erase quite a bit. Okay. So now that I have this outline, now I turn to getting a lot more detailed. And where I typically start, I think in this case I might have to go. Well, typically I do left to right, I think, just because then I get less on my palm. And I think for this, yeah, I'll spend a lot of time looking at the art. Yeah, so these three elements might be the most important. There's both the arm, the hand, and the face carry a lot of expression that needs to be captured carefully. And there's also details in the statue itself. There are these lines where the seams are between the metal plates that I think are important to capture. And then the cloth is just I think I know how to abbreviate the cloth well enough that it'll pass. So yeah, by the time I get to the cloth, I'll be a bit more tired, but I'll have but it'll, in a sense, it'll be a lot easier because I don't need to capture every single detail the same way I would with the arm, hand, and face. And the crown will be an interesting challenge because the windows in the crown are very detailed. Yeah, so this will be a neat challenge. So I'm going to zoom in on my computer. Okay, so I'll start with the torch, and the torch is incredibly intricate now that I'm zooming in on it. And yeah, so this is going to be very difficult to capture. But that's okay. This is a learning process, and I'm all for it. Okay, so I can already see the errors that I've made earlier, but that's, again, it's okay. This is why I come back. Like, this is why it's okay, because I come back and make adjustments. And I'm taking note of where the apex is for these curves. There's an apex here and an apex here. So curves and circles at angles I've always had a lot of trouble drawing because they can just be so subtle, you know. And here I'm focusing on outlines with the understanding that I'm going to come back and do a lot more refinements. Yeah, this is really hard to figure out. Yeah, so this needs to come all the way down here. And then there's a subtle geometry where this outer circle is bigger than this inner circle, and it's also tapered. So I need to capture that. Mostly, it really comes down to drawing what's in the picture. Yeah, this is actually very difficult. And the way that I'll give the illusion is the fact that this outer circle wraps around and disappears later. That's one part of the illusion. And then the other part is that I need to add a very subtle shadow underneath this outer circle, in addition to the shadow of the portions that are in the that's shadow cast from the sun. So those two elements together will complete the illusion, but I need to capture the circular portions as precisely as humanly possible here. So this part needs to be more circular. This is halfway. Yeah, so now I need, just because I need a more precise positioning of the center, I'm drawing the X, the cross in this cell. Okay. That goes just a touch above there. And the outer circle needs to be just a little bit bigger. The apex of that needs to come right around there. And this is very tricky. The outer circle disappears behind the inner circle right around there. Yeah, it's a very difficult angle. So that should cross about halfway. That's probably good. So if I can't capture the exact curves to my satisfaction, at some point I have to make a compromise and just say, you know what, I'm gonna, instead of looking at the picture, I'm gonna look at the paper and then make some executive decisions about what to keep and what to alter. And it's not going to look quite like the original picture, but yeah, but that's just life. Just drawing the base of that torch. Something nice about this paper is that because it's so smooth, things are very easy to erase. Apex of this guy is around here. A little bit fast, but the torch also has, yeah, this is giving me flashbacks to the time I drew the Palma de Mallorca, which is it's a cathedral with a beautiful window, and it had, this feels like Gothic architecture. That's what this feels like. And yeah, that was a very, very difficult thing. So I'm pausing because there's something off with how I've drawn things here. Things don't quite seem to be lining up. I'm just drawing the bottom portion of the torch. Yeah, it's perfectly vertical there. Okay, it kind of fades into obscurity right around there. Yeah, this oval is really, it's really bothered me because I don't think I quite have it correct. Not the end of the world, but the major axis just doesn't quite feel it's where it should be. Yeah, major axis is right around something like that. Yeah, I think I need to pull this in a little bit. Ever so slightly. Another thing I like to do is just turn things upside down, and this helps. A pretty standard trick, I think. Really helps with getting rid of, what your eyes want to see and are designed to see by evolution, and will force you to just look at the shadows as they are. And I can see this is, okay, so this is actually pretty good. It's not bad at all. Feels like it could be better, but that's always going to be true. It's always going to be the case. Yeah, and then the tricky thing about this part underneath is that it also has two different rings that are positioned differently of different sizes. And for this one, the details are so small for what, for the medium I'm working in, that I don't really have a choice but to just kind of keep this a bit amorphous, which is too bad. I wish I had this would be a great thing to draw with a much bigger canvas, but that's okay. Part of why I do this, despite how difficult it can be for the chosen medium, is that I want to learn how to compromise. I want to learn how to abbreviate various things. Because art is not necessarily about being hyper-realistic. And that's something that took me a while to learn and really understand. So the way I'm drawing the shadow is not what's actually happening, because this shadow is too light right now. It needs to be much darker, almost black, just to really show that this portion is recessed. There's this outer rim, and then you go really sharp and deep into something. Okay, I think this is actually not bad. Yeah, so I'll do some shading with darker colors for the outer ring in a moment. But I just want to make sure the rest of this shape is on track for more detailed work in a moment. So I'll draw the spikes along the outer edge of this torch. Interestingly, there's actually a ring, a thin metal ring that goes around the upper portion of this torch. Okay, so there's one here, one here. Okay, so I'm going to skip drawing that ring for the most part. This thin metal ring. I'm just going to do a quick sketch of it so that in case it helps with guiding other elements. And then we have the flame. The flame starts right around there. These almost look like fingers at first. Certainly upside down they look like fingers. I got to capture these contours. They come out towards the camera, then they recess, and then they come back out. So they come back out towards the camera, go back in, and then out again a little bit. I'll try to capture that because that's a pretty important part of the torch. So there. Yeah, in fact, this ring's just going to be a bit of a distraction, so let me get rid of that. And for the flames, the shadows here are relatively light. So I can just use a blending stump. And some parts are a bit harsher. Like right here, there's a very subtle but harsh shadow. I'll capture it like that. There's another harsh shadow from this piece of flame. I'll keep the outlines kind of subtle to give the illusion of brightness. And in fact here, so where the sun reflects the most off of these surfaces, I'm making sure that there's no graphite there. Okay, and towards the base of the flames, it's a bit darker. We do have various lines that come out of the torch, kind of like that. Yeah. And this is all relatively dark except for a few of these spots. So where there's the bend from out to in, there's a lot of reflection. There's also a lot of reflection more on, you know, this side of each of these pieces of flame. And if I was more skilled, I would probably cross-hatch some of these with just the right values. But given the size and my skill level, I kind of have to leave it at this. Okay. Let's see, and then next is, yeah, this very intricate piece that I'm just going to abbreviate and really only draw the most obvious shadows here. So using a 4B to get that really dark color, or the dark shades, dark color values, intensity values in there. I'll make those spikes stand out along the edge of this torch. And then the spikes become less dark along this portion, so this is a good place. Oh yeah, so there's actually a lot of darkness there. And then that very harsh darkness gives way into a subtle gradient, which peaks in intensity right at that edge, the other edge. And probably I should have a 2B for this, but I think my H will work just fine. Okay. And then there's a lot more detail within here that I'm going to, maybe I'll come back to. Yeah, but this needs to be given a bit more definition. Because from a distance, yeah, so I'll refine these spikes depending on when I feel like it. Which who knows when that will be. It'll certainly be in the time that I actually draw this portrait, but yeah, they're actually very, very well defined. It's right there. If the portion of the spikes along this torch that casts a shadow is actually quite large. Yeah. It's a start. I'm not happy with a lot of things here. Yeah, it feels like this needs to come out a lot more. Made those spikes a bit more recessed than they should be. And this really is not the most important part of this portrait, but with something like this, just personally speaking, details really matter. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, that's a lot better. It gives a much better sense of the tapering on the top of the torch. And I want to show that this portion is more, it's a bit more recessed than as I've drawn it. There's actually a lot that goes behind. So that might take care of that. Yeah. And there's a sense of imbalance with this end. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I just have to fatten that out a little bit. Okay. And I want to try and make the shadows of the flames blend, make it look like it really is coming from the inside of the torch as opposed to being disembodied. Let's fill in a few. Details there. Keep the spikes well defined. Yes, now it's bothering me that my choice of the spike positioning actually wasn't very uniform, so I'll fix that. Okay, and then I drew that portion a bit too low. Okay. So now the spikes are more or less uniform. I'm going to come back. Well, maybe let me just kind of fix as much as I can here, because the spikes just look very non-uniform. So these a little bit smaller. There's a little one over there. Okay. If I don't like this, I can always come back and alter it to something more to my liking. So really not the biggest deal. And then for this portion, and hopefully things have been measured out or eyed well enough that this part goes well. Wow, it's awful. Yeah, it's very difficult. It's okay. Yeah, that contour is probably good enough for now. And if all else fails, I'll just add more grid lines to this thing and just kind of brute force it. That's what I might have to do actually for the torch, because this is actually it's a lot more difficult than I was expecting. Right, so here I can use 6B. And then a lot of this torch is in this kind of subtle shadow here and here. And I am going to abbreviate this shadow, I think, because yeah, I gotta know when to cut my losses when it comes to details, and this is one such instance. I can only do so much. And again, if it was a bigger canvas, I could absolutely spend more time with these details, but this is just a tiny little sketch pad. Okay, so I have the broad shadows set on the top of the torch. So if you were to squint or like blur your eyes, the lighting that I've drawn should match at least the portion of the torch that I've worked on so far. Yeah, so far it's not bad. Yeah. Yeah, this portion of the torch is in much darker shadow. This upper left portion is the lightest. And then, yeah, the shadow is subtly dark on the top portion here. Top to bottom, it gets lighter. Right to left, it gets lighter until it peaks all the way to the left. Yeah, like that. Okay. Yeah, so I'll come back to the intricate patterns there, because I'm actually kind of, as much as I criticize myself, it's like, it's just weird how things come together. And suddenly I'm somehow less unhappy, even though it feels like I'm ruining this sketch more and more as I continue working on it. Here I'm just adding the just emphasizing the shadow along this portion of the rim. Yeah, it's really hard to get all this right. Yeah, but yeah, so that is good enough for a start. Next is the handle and the base here. This paper is so freaking smooth. Like it makes it. It's almost like it's harder to blend because it's so easy to blend. Everything just smears so easily that it's hard to like get a good sense of what's happening. Wow, there is so much detail. There is an unbelievable amount of detail in this statue. I'm pretty blown away here. For the thumb, yeah, the palm comes down like that. And it would be healthier if I drew the handle, I guess, first. So let me just do that. It's just hard to even draw the handle because a lot of it is just obscured. But it's something like this. Something like this. This. Yeah, it's possible I might have to restart this whole thing just because like I really need different paper. But that's neither here nor there. I gotta figure this out. Okay. And I know that it might sound very self-defeating and very negative. But it's a very toned down version of what goes on in my head. And I don't say that to make anyone feel bad. Certainly not my, I don't want to make myself feel bad. But it's a lot less harsh than my voice has been in the past. And in that sense, the harshness that you hear, to me, is actually much, much more gentle than I've let myself speak to I haven't let myself speak to myself more gently than I am speaking now. It's always been really, really harsh. Let's see. Yeah, I want the pinky to end a bit sooner. It does. Yeah, it's more. looks like that. Okay. And the thumb. Let's see, so that was our spot. The thumb really is, yeah, it's a lot bigger. Much bigger. I gotta let myself be a bit bold. So obviously the way that I speak to myself, not a good thing to practice in general for just anyone. But what you're hearing is me learning to be a lot more gentle. Because even though the words might sound harsh, the tone in which I'm saying them is just very, very, it's almost soothing for me, which might give you some sense of just how harsh my inner monologue has been. That's just something I've lived with for a long time. And now I'm learning to move away from it. Now I'm learning to speak to myself in more healthy ways, and it's a whole process. It's like just because I say harsh things to myself now doesn't mean I will always do that. It just means I'm in the middle of learning. Just as right now I'm learning to draw. And nothing's really going to look quite right. Not always on the first try. But this is why I have an eraser. This is why I let myself go back and fix issues as they, to the best of my ability. So just a gentle reminder that we're all in different stages of life and learning and experiencing different things. And I'm learning to take a lot more stock in my struggles and my needs and the things that matter to me more than anything else. Because how else do you function? And I've tried to function while ignoring my needs and trivializing my needs, and that just has never worked out. And I've tried with the same passion and intent as I try anything else. And at some point, I just had to go, okay, you know what? I've tried enough. I've done enough. At some point, I need to listen to what my mind and body are telling me. But it's a process. Okay, so again, I'm struggling with, okay, if you draw, you understand what I mean when I say that, like, I only see the imperfections here. But what the fuck else am I gonna do? I just have to keep moving forward, keep doing my best. And if I'm lucky, things will turn out just fine. Okay. So I try to capture, yeah, the torch is really interesting because there's this mass that wants to fall this way. So the handle is pushing up against the palm. So I'm really trying to capture that squish. And it's very difficult. That's okay. Yeah, so let's give it a little bit more room here. I think the squish of the palm just needs just a bit of shading. And cast the shadow from the handle. Okay. I think I can make this a bit shallower. I can definitely afford to make the thumb a bit smaller, I think. Yeah, it does feel a little bit relatively bigger compared to the other digits. So I'm also drawing at a time when I think I would also be more efficient and much quicker to pick up on what's not quite right if I had more rest. And again, now it's 4:18 a.m. I've never drawn at this hour before, so it's a very different experience. And I can keep tapering that thumb a little bit. I'm hungry. I might just like randomly get like some Wawa pizza or something. I don't know. Before I move on, I want to check how the angles look here. Yeah, so that wrist can go down a little bit more. So that'll have to do for now. And let me make sure I have the rest of the arm positioned correctly. Hell of a forearm on this lady. Like, wow. Never noticed just how cut she is. She definitely hits the gym. Okay, so I think that'll have to do. So it feels like the wrist is maybe a bit, the way that I've done the shading, it does feel a bit like the wrist is overextended. All right, because I think, yeah, I need to do it. Shading needs to come from a bit lower down, I think. Yeah, so now that looks a bit better. Something that's crazy to me is just how only a few subtle, I mean, you just saw how subtly I tweaked that, and already the wrist looks a lot less overextended, it looks a bit more straight. Yeah, one of the crazy things about, that's just one of the crazy things about drawing. It's just, drawing is incredibly sensitive. Our eyes are incredibly sensitive. We have, as humans, we just have this unbelievable ability to notice things and perceive things. It doesn't become apparent until you try to create things for other people to pick up on, or recreate things. Okay, so this will have to stay as it is. Yeah. All right, so not bad of an arm. We'll see what the final product looks like. But now I'm getting less pessimistic as the moments go on. And I'm just including some lines here for those rivets or the seams of the arm, just subtle things that I might just keep subtle. We'll see. I think this lady is a climber. I think she's like a world champion climber, rock climber. Goes bouldering on the weekends. Flies out to Colorado, because that's where all the boulders are. And then just climbs them. And I just realized Colorado literally has a city called Boulder, and now I'm laughing internally at how silly this all is. I don't know. It's very late. The way I'm shading this here, it is different from, yeah, so I'll try to match the picture a bit more, but it is very difficult because the shade on this part of the forearm here is very uniform. And that, one of my cats is making biscuits like upside down. It is adorable. I wish I could, because I know if I move the camera, she'll stop. Yeah, like she's upside down and like covering her, like her eyes are completely covered because they're like, you know, the bottom of her face is like this, and then she's just like kneading on the edge of the cat bed. Okay. Yeah, this, geez, the Statue of Liberty, Lady Liberty's forearms do not fuck around. Wow. That, I wish I had some of those muscle fibers. God gave her quite a few favors there. Good for her. Okay. So here's where we are. I'm thinking I'm going to take a break because yeah, it's very late, but I'll show the